Hello, I'm Josh Baer, and welcome to the Baer Facts podcast. Last month, we spoke with artist Takashi Murakami, who himself listened to one of our most popular podcast episodes featuring the ex-Blum and Poe co-founder Jeff Poe, right after it was announced he was stepping back. It seems like every time Jeff gets on the mic, people stop what they're doing and listen, even if they're a renowned artist like Takashi. And if there's one guy we should be listening to, it's Jeff. That's why, for this month's episode, we agreed with Jeff to return for another round of discussion on the present and future states of the market, how galleries and artists can adapt to survive, and if the grass is really greener on the other side, 1 year after his retirement from the art world. This episode is brought to you by Arthur Analytics, your single pane of glass for following the art world. I've been using it over the last couple of weeks as I've been traveling around the world, tracking ongoing sales and artists I'm following from London and Paris. Arthur Analytics truly is a digital Swiss Army knife for art collecting, combining powerful tools and data, the stuff we professionals rely on every day, with an easy-to-use interface available on the web or on your phone. They've provided our listeners with a free trial, no commitment required, we like that, at arthuranalytics.com/bearfacts. Check it out right after this episode. So welcome back to the Baer Facts podcast. I'm Josh Baer, and we're doing something we've never tried before, which is having a guest on twice. Does that Joe guy do two guests multiple times on his podcast? You know?
Why not?
Why not? So we're here with Jeff Poe, the founder of Blum and Poe. A year ago, you were here, Jeff, saying, I'm changing my life. This podcast was by far the one that got the most attention, both in the art world that we know and outside. So what was the reaction that you got from people who heard our podcast a year ago?
Yeah, I got a lot of positive stuff from a lot of dealers and also from collectors. They like the podcast. They like the honesty. I do not know how to do social media. So my wife was helping me scroll through this, the comments. I didn't know that you could actually look at them all. And yeah, the comments, the meaner they were, the more kind of hilarious I thought they were. I do love the fact that I was considered a grump, but that's okay.
So here we are, another episode of Two Grumpy Old White Guys. Sorry, Jerry Saltz, who you can come back maybe someday too. It's like, I don't like to look at all that, nasty comments. I know my friend Damien Hirst, he loves to look at it. So it's like, maybe you have thicker skin.
Yeah, it's just fun. It's also because I'm out.
Yes, you were retired. You have like 9 hours to sit there and do that while the rest of us are still working, right?
Yeah. It's definitely hard on the other side of the table, for sure.
But anything in specific that comes to mind, or just the take is like, thank you for speaking our truth? Was that a little bit, or was there something else?
No, it was really about just being the honesty of it, which I thought was, look, the art world is a very insular place, and it does not like to kind of take a look at itself and navel gaze and be honest. And I spent decades in it. And it's definitely changed a lot, even in the last year. You asked me something really interesting in the podcast, and I didn't answer it, and it was in my head when we were sitting here at this table a year ago. And it was, what was the moment where, like, the big moment that actually happened for you? And it sounds so kind of emotional in a certain sense and so kind of small. But I loved, as a child, the Thanksgiving parade, New York. And I think it was, I don't remember the year, 2012, 13. And my mother and I would watch it. And the balloons were going down, wherever the hell they go down, Fifth Avenue or whatever.
Central Park West.
Okay.
Broadway.
And my mother was so excited that Takashi did the balloons. It was the moment my mother lost her mind completely over this. And it made me feel so proud that going from being a child and watching this thing, a special thing what I did with my mom as a kid, because my brother was 4 years older than me, he didn't care about balloons, parades, and I did. And, you flash forward and it's 30 years or something, 40, and here's this moment and I was part of it. And my mother was just so proud. That just killed me. So that was actually it.
That's a sweet story. So Takashi, when you're listening again, you've touched a lot of lives. Then our conversation turned to like, as it's done occasionally in the last year, it's like, what the heck is going on with the gallery world in particular versus the art world? And you said, I've got a lot to say about that. And then we kicked it around and decided, okay, let's now look a year after this pivot that you made in what was the end of a boom to now it's 1 year later. What would you sort of say your takeaways of the last year have been? And then we'll get to where we need to go.
Okay. The galleries didn't learn from the pandemic. And there was this moment where there's actually, it's not a secret that most galleries were incredibly successful during the pandemic.
To their surprise.
Yeah, to everyone's surprise. I thought it was over. I thought we were cooked. I told Tim, like, well, it was a good run, literally.
Yeah, I remember March or April 2020, it's like, oh, we may never sell anything again. We may be out of business.
Yeah, it's going to be over. And it actually was the absolute complete opposite. But the reason why everybody made money was because the expenses went down, and the expenses were the art fairs and the exhibitions and traveling and shipping and all of it. And it all just switched over to being on the computer. And the Chinese went nuts. We were selling things left and right. And sure, we weren't selling as much. Revenue went way down, but expenses went much further down than revenue did in terms of percentage. And therefore, you pick up that net, and everyone made more money by doing less. And that coming out of that, I was very much in favor of starting to do less.
Less is more.
You can be successful by contraction, yes. But the problem is that everyone went right back to the party. And those balloons that went up for 6 months, a year, they've fallen to the ground and become whoopee cushions.
Well, I guess then it depends if people cashed out. My expectation was people who've been through booms and busts. I've been through the crisis of 1986. 9/11 was an art crisis. 2008 was a financial crisis. Then you had, probably missing one, there's a hurricane in New York, but COVID as a crisis. So we've been through these. The people would say, oh, let me take some cash off the table because there's going to be a contraction. Didn't happen this time, did it?
Didn't really happen, no. I mean, it didn't. But the difference between all those years that you just counted off and coming out of COVID and now is that everyone overexpanded because they got high on the supply. So the big galleries, the 4 big galleries, they can't stop. They're just going to keep moving on, and they're saddled with gigantic amounts of overhead with 10, 12, 15, 20 spaces. And that's not sustainable.
So if you were in your McKinsey hat and you were going into one of them, what would you advise them to do? We're talking the 4. We're talking Gagosian, Hauser-Wirth, Pace, and Werner. What would be your advice?
Well, this is utopian. They're not going to do it because it's ego-based. They're all men. And
they have ego? They have strong egos?
They got into it because of ego, and they're not going to stop. They're not going to switch. But what they need to do is cut back. Somebody's got to blink, not flutter their eyes and get rid of, like Zorner got rid of like 12 people or something like that, or 15 people. Or I think, I can't remember, White Cube got rid of it. White Cube is actually a big organization too. They've got a lot of employees.
Personally, I would put them in the mega gallery.
I would too.
Most people don't.
Well, because they don't have that many locations. If they had more locations and they started doing more like that.
Well, actually they have 5. They have London, several spaces, Paris, New York.
They're in New York now.
New York, Hong Kong, and Seoul.
Let's throw them in.
Okay. Hey, Jay.
Yeah.
This is maybe bad news.
Yeah. Are you sleeping?
You're a mega gallery. You're screwed.
Yeah. So they're not going to switch or change. They're not even freighter. They're tankers now at this point. They're just chugging along because like that, you can't stop. Once you're moving along like that, you can't stop in the middle of the sea. You're going to keep, even if you put
You mean it's the ocean liner, they don't turn too quickly.
No, and you're gonna wind up just cruising along here, and you're saddled with all these spaces that you've got leases that you can't. It's a nightmare. But yes, they could do better by cutting back, and they could do better by cutting back artists, which is a radical thing to do. They could do better by focusing, and that's going to help the artists. It's not going to hurt the artists.
Let's finish the mega because I want to get to like the mid and to the emergent. So do you think what happens to an artist who gets sort of like cut back on when they're at a mega gallery and they have to go back into the dating pool? Are they like damaged goods?
Not at all.
So what do they have to do?
I think they have more leverage. They're going to be in better shape. And that's the misnomer here. Because there is literally, Tim and I have said it a million times, there is no magic door. You suddenly go to Gagosian, you go to Hauser, nothing's going to change. They're not going to sell to people that everyone else is selling to. They're not going to be able to get you a museum show that you would have already gotten. That's not the way it really works. The reason why they go to those galleries is because of a number of reasons, but number one is obviously the spaces are massive.
And beautiful.
And they can be beautiful sometimes not. And also, too, if they need fabrication money or they need money for the studio, they'll underwrite it,
Well, let's finish that part. It's like, what happens to the prices? They go in, the prices go up.
They go in, the prices go up, but then is that sustainable? Is it actually smart? Is it even in the best interest of the artist? And I often don't think it is. And I think that the artist should take a hard look at the galleries they're involved in. And also throwing everything into one gallery is a massive mistake because then there's no competition. So if you're just with Hauser, and you're with no one else, well, what good is that? Who's checking Hauser? Who's checking Swarner?
Well, it's not that they're like, bad people or evil. They're just not, the galleries and the artists are no longer aligned precisely the same direction. And what's best for the gallery may not be what's best for the artist. It's not like they're against each other, but they're not always rowing together.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Jeff Poe, where he'll share his thoughts on the challenges facing galleries of all sizes, the pressures influencing today's art prices, and the importance of separating the art from the ego. This and more after the break. BitGo is the leading infrastructure provider of digital asset solutions, offering custody, wallets, staking, trading, financing, and more. BitGo is the preferred security and operational backbone for more than 1,500 institutional clients in over 50 countries. For more information, please visit www.bitgo.com.
Well, let's go down to the next tier, down the sort of mid-level. You're not going to probably go down to a young kid just out of school, or aside, you're going to go to whatever they called mega minor or mid-tier. Should the prices go down?
Sure, if it makes sense. Why not? I don't think it's the end of the world. Things need to change, and it's okay for these things that have been so locked to be actually opened up and be fluid. So what? I mean, that's what's happening at auction. You got an artist that at one time was $1 million now, major artist. I'm not going to name names here, but things are 200.
Well, my argument is that no one goes broke making a profit, and no one goes broke, hopefully, on $200,000 objects, unless those artists got their studios and their production way out of whack, and suddenly they have the expenses of the gallery of like $100,000 a month.
Yeah, that's true too. Then they wind up getting in trouble, and that's also a problem. But these major galleries, their overhead is massive. And when you're talking about an overhead of $10 million, $20 million a month, $120, $150, $250 million a year. And yeah, let's say a gallery, you'll see it in ArtNet News or Art News, who sold what? Somebody sold Augustin for $10 million, or somebody sold Joan Mitchell for $25 million. They're making $2 or $3 million off that sale, if that. So there might be these like massive amounts of money that are coming through the gallery, but at the end of the day, their margins are much lower on those high-end things. So they need to sell $700-800 million worth of art a year to just be able to survive, if even more. That's massive amounts of money. And then that needs an infrastructure that's massive, and it needs more space, and it needs more staff. And then suddenly what happens when that starts to contract.
I think we've looked at, and I've been writing about this for about a year, we've looked at this as a sales problem, but it's an expense problem. So in your scenario, if that gallery went down to selling $500 million a year, shit, that's a lot of art.
Yeah.
That should be enough to be profitable. So it's really, at least at the mid-tier or the high end, it's not a sales problem. It's an expense problem.
Which goes back to what I was saying about the pandemic. We learned that expenses are the most important thing, not sales. That's what I learned from that.
Now, within this, just to close the circle, I've been arguing again for what we said, it's okay if your price goes down.
Yeah,
why is everybody so freaked out about it? Particularly dealers that I've been talking to for a while. Some of them is, oh my God, we could never do that. Our collectors were shot at me. But I sort of noticed lately dealers talking to me and saying, you know, you're kind of right here.
Yeah, because look at what's going on at the auctions. If the auction prices are low, how do you justify that artist still selling at $250,000 when at auction it's $70,000? How can you justify that? And why don't you just take care of the artists? And why don't we have honest conversations in the art world about this and just be truthful about it and actually help the artists? Because that's another part of this too. I don't think that these large galleries are very helpful towards artists. I really honestly believe that competition's healthy and that the job of the dealer is to take care of the artist, period.
Well, what happened, and this is the hypocrisy for me, it's like when the prices went way up, galleries say, you know, we double the price. It's not really my fault. You know, that's just supply and demand. We didn't really want to raise the price, but that's just, you know, how economics works. So we double the price, quadruple the price, 10x the price and then, but that was not their fault, even though, they're all putting more money in their pockets for a while, but they can't use the same argument to lower the price. Like demand is down. Okay.
Yeah.
Price goes down. It's like, I would say some of the big artists learned this, the Hearst and Princes and Grosjean's probably too. It's like, okay, we can lower the price. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, we can lower the price. And also, let's not forget, maybe we should actually not put so much art out there. And that's also something that the dealers will do. Even the large galleries will do. They'll saturate the market if somebody's on their way up and not think about the long term and not think about like, well, wait a minute, this artist that's so hot right now and started at, you know, 20,000 and then went to 200 and now let's sell them for 400.
So
and
let's
that's
talk
in 2
about
years.
Another sort of level, or from the relationship between the collector and the gallery, because I don't work directly with artists very often, so I work with clients and galleries. So the number of times now that we play by the rules, client wants to sell something. I'm not going to say it's not speculative. Sometimes it might be, or whatever reason. They're aging out, it doesn't fit. And you go back to the gallery, either by contractual obligation or by the standards of the art world, you have to go back. And usually we've seen they're like, oh, we'll take it back. We'll try to sell it. And it sits there for 4 years.
Right.
And nothing happens.
Right.
That's not a good situation, is it?
No, it's not a good situation because the dealer wants to take it off the market, make sure it doesn't go to auction, and try to control it. The whole game is about control, right? So you don't want to allow that to happen. Yet at the same time, it would be smart to have honest conversations with the collectors and say flat out, look, the market's down right now. I'm doing everything I can. Can you just hold it and just try to make this thing rebound? It's good if you are actually supportive rather than running around and going, oh, geez, I lost a lot of money on this. It would be great if you were like, actually, I love the work. I love living with it, because collectors talk to each other. But what you're missing here too is that it's often now consultants. Collectors are, this is the consultant's job now. So now there's an agent in between the actual buyer and.
Well, as the person there, sometimes that's useful because people can vent, oh, the dealer's an ass, or why is the collector doing this? And it's like, and I can go, yeah, I get it. I understand. And that's the case there. But
what are they saying to you when you go have that conversation? Are they honest? And you know they're not, right?
I've changed the conversation. I've discovered that they're either going to sell it right away or they're not at all. So the conversations that we've had are twofold. One is, we're going to give you a narrow window of time. like 30 days. You go first to make something happen. And there's less incentive for the gallery directors to do it because they're on a small margin. So their commissions are much less for reselling work than selling primary work. I find that the owners of the gallery, their name on the door, are more interested in maintaining the relationship with my clients. So they may work a little harder for a smaller deal. Where it starts to break down is like when my clients are like, I don't mind taking a loss. Can you sell it? It was 100, but I'd take 60. That nothing happens there. And that's where the paralysis is, where the dealers are unwilling or unable. You can tell me better. I mean, it's 30 years since I had a gallery. You're just a year out, that they don't seem to do that.
Yeah, they don't seem to do that. But I didn't do the sales that much, to be honest with you. I mean, at the same time, yeah, it's a tricky situation if something's 100 and then it's 60 and then you can't sell it. And then maybe it is time to go, okay, well, take a flyer at auction. There's nothing you can do about it. Because if you put a 30-day time limit on it and they get it back, well, then there you have it. Even if it's 60 from 100 to 60. And then either you hold or you put to auction, then you're in control. But this relationship sphere that we're all in here, it is best to, if you can, and things have gone that drastically down 40%, to not badmouth the artist, to not badmouth the gallery, not badmouth the market, and try to, as much as we can here in the art world, do what they can to help the artist. Because at the end of the day, I keep going to circle back to it. It's the artist, the artist, the artist.
Well, at what point of the artist's ego related to their price?
Huge, please. Well, there are a few, very limited amount. But yes, artists talk about with other artists, constantly think about.
I'm as good as that artist. I mean, I worked with a very big artist. He was a very famous political artist, and he and his wife, you can probably guess. And they were and you would put them way on the political spectrum to the left, ultra left. But they cared about their retail price more than any other artist I worked with. And well, I'm as good as, Boslitz, so I should have the same price. I'm like, but Boslitz sells 100 of those and you've sold one. But they were willing to give huge discounts. They just needed retail to appear that way.
Every artist has an ego, of course. That's why they're successful artists. They're not going to be successful unless they have a certain sense of themselves. And that's the business part of it. Every art school should teach a business class. They really should. They should also teach psychology classes.
How about no art schools because they're in such debt? And what are they learning?
That's true, but the dialogue and the relationships, they're important.
Well, one of the big dealers said recently in an article, like, oh, all the artists, they should all have teaching jobs so that it doesn't matter if they sell anything. Did you read that?
No, I didn't.
And it was an interesting thing. It was Stefania Bartolami who said that. And it's like, it works for her in her gallery than most of the artists that she works with have that. So it's kind of a luxury. And I hear where she's coming from, but it's impossible with the number of artists and the number of teaching jobs there are to have that.
Yeah.
Keep listening to hear Jeff and Josh tackle how major galleries have, or haven't, created succession plans, opportunities for the slow-moving art world to pivot in increasingly fast-moving times, and other elephants in the room. We'll be right back after this message.
Arthur Analytics is a platform you can rely on to help develop your art collecting skills. Let's say you're interested in buying a nice Basquiat, but you're stuck on a layover in Paris. All you have to do is search Jean-Michel Basquiat, and within seconds you can see the latest news, sales, and trend data. Plus, with a Near Me map, which covers over 500 cities, you could step outside and go see the work for yourself. It's never been easier and faster to access the data collectors need. For more information, head to arthuranalytics.com/Barefax. So let's drill down even further.
There's something else I want to say too about how things have changed, and that is we've been waiting for the shoe to drop, which was people have been waiting for the ladies, Paula Cooper, Mary Goodman, Barbara, like what's going to happen, and now it started. and Gavin going. And this happened, coming before the pandemic and a little bit out of it, obviously. And there started to be this kind of sea change that was slow. These things, it's always a dimmer. It's not a light switch. So these things happen over time. They happen slowly, but the landscape starts to change. And when the landscape starts to change, which it did, just those are 4 examples. There are other 2. Simon Reed leaving. I mean, I could go on and on.
So it's like episodes of like Succession in some ways, or it's really well planned out. And some galleries who started it a little earlier having their senior people as partners.
So let's go back up again. So yeah, I'm certain that Barbara left things in order. Has Larry?
We doubt it.
Right. So what happens when that happens?
And that'll be like Monday Night Football. There's going to be, or shootout at OK Corral. I mean, that's ultimately when we talk about this on the macro level of the only gallery in a sense that matters out in the real world that everybody on the street has heard of, whether you're at the Spa La Costa or at the Captain team, they know Larry Gagosian.
That's why I want to swing the conversation back upstairs.
So let's go, Larry. It's like, if he went out of business, that would be catastrophic to the entire business. If he went bankrupt or whatever, right? That's too big to fail.
Or if he's gone.
Well, when he's gone, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it is a much different thing. I don't even know what that looks like. And that's what I'm saying. What winds up happening when that happens?
Well, I think he made an effort to try to do something, and it was so complicated that wasn't working. He has no kids. So that's so it's no natural heirs that matter.
First, it was Frank Moore, right? And he's gone. Then it was
Andrew Fabricant. And
he's gone. So where is it now? There's a board. What happens with all this? I mean, you are talking about the top of the mountain. Top of the mountain gets lopped off.
Well, I went to a client of mine about 15 years ago and I said, listen, I have this idea. I think we should buy Marion Goodman Gallery and say, Marion, your inventory is yours, but we'll take over to manage this brand into, Nerdler went 150 years. Caselli's still going. It's possible with senior management and the people with the relationship with the artist to continue that. And it was like, everybody looked at me like I was like a moron, which maybe I was, but it was kind of an idea of like, how does that happen?
Yeah, but that was then. Nodler, where are they today? Marlboro closed. Yeah, I mean, in prison maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that's like, so this is talk about the, elephant in the room. I mean, and these little tiny iterations of what I'm talking about these iterations of what I'm talking about pale in comparison.
But back to galleries at that level, and I've said to some of them, it's like, if you're just breaking even or losing a little bit of money now, you made so much money down the line, you can hold off for 5 years. If you're used to making $25 million a year in your pocket, and this year you lost 700,000, you're okay for a while.
If that's a huge gallery, yeah.
And, or even Paula Cooper, it's like, okay, I have to sell one Judd that I have, paste, put, it might hurt. They might have to put a Rothko in or something like that. But that's okay. You sort of go up and down. They're not too worried about me. I'm not going to worry too much about them surviving.
No, I wouldn't worry about them surviving because they've made a lot of money. You're right. And they have material and they have lines of credit, which is you don't really want to ever dip into. And they have real estate and they could redo their loans, but not right now. I mean, yeah, they have a lot of pieces.
But then it's like the fear on the one hand is like the mid-level gallery. Let's go back to them and what's going on there. And then I still want to come back to like your gallery then open 3 years or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So again, we're talking about what sort of changes need to happen and why the art world is so slow to do them. How about this theory that I put out a few weeks ago? How about fewer or even no exhibitions?
Yeah, that's madness. That's total. That's so punk rock. I can't even believe it. That doesn't make any sense.
It's a huge expense.
It's not, because you already have the space. You've got your staff in there. Yes, I get it. It's a huge expense in terms of having to ship the work, install the work, all of that, photograph the work.
How about fewer shows that last longer?
Fewer shows that last longer could work, or don't expand so much, or rethink how you do things.
Well, get more into like, I'm sitting here, I'm 30, It's like, okay, dude, you say rethink how to do things. Give me some ideas.
Oh boy. Well, we talked about expenses. I used to run the gallery on something I called the compass. It's so stupid and so simple. And this is from 20 years ago. And basically Basel was north and Miami was south. Miami was December and then June. So you've got across from each other. You got east, which would be March, April, and west would be September. Happens to also be basically 4 quarters, right? So you're going to make money in the Basels. You just need to have a really good artist that's going to help you get to Basel in March, April. You need to have a really good artist in September. You need 2 really good artists. And these analytics that are coming out, I don't know if they're true or not, but saying that, art fairs account for 30% or whatever it is. Let's say art fairs account for 30%. And let's just say you go back and only do those 2 fairs, or you just do 2 fairs instead of 5. And you can pick up an enormous amount of money doing those 2 fairs. Now you're 30%. So you got to come up with 70%. And let's say, your East show brings in 15 or 20%, and your show in September in the West brings in 15 or 20%. You're almost there. You're like 70%, 65. And then what do? Well, if the rest of your program can't sustain that, then you're in trouble. But if you don't do all these fairs, if you don't do so much, if you actually concentrate, if you maybe get rid of some artists, maybe it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard conversation. But if you do that and you restrict yourself and you bring yourself back and you don't have the exposure with the expenses.
But the solution seems like in the last few years has been not fewer artists, it's more artists.
I know, and that's what I'm saying.
And it was like, well, if I had 20 artists and I do a little bit of each, then maybe that's been the solution. And at the very big level, that's not enough to move the needle on a $20 million a month operation, but on a $20,000 a month operation, maybe.
Not necessarily, because if you've got a small gallery, you don't have the infrastructure to do that. And then you're going to have to hire people. And it's very expensive. It sounds like it's an easy thing just to take an artist and put their name on your program. It is not.
It's called the website.
Yeah, your website.
You might have heard of those things to try to do that.
In your art format. But, that's not the reality. You bring an artist into the gallery, your entire infrastructure gets stressed, all the way down from the preps to the registrars, to the photography, to social media.
That's been the solution.
To the directors. That's what I'm saying.
That's the last year or two.
That solution's it doesn't work.
Looks like we'd get a press release once a week of a new artist. I think I had 40 weeks in a row or something like that. It's like, okay, that's a strategy. Maybe it works.
I don't know if it works because, once again, you're like, are you at service to the artist? Are you really helping the career by having so many artists?
Or are they just fungible and they can be, replaceable by the next 20? I mean, when I went out of business back in the 18th century, it was that I no longer had a hot artist. And it felt like you needed, out of your 10 or 15 artists, you needed one artist who was in real demand all the time. It could switch which one. But it needed, and I had years where I had several and then suddenly I had none. And I think that's sort of the old style that it's like, but it's not so easy to just say, oh, I'm going to have an artist who's like, we can sell 50 of them in a week.
Right. I don't think bringing on artists is the solution. I think actually cutting back expenses is the solution, cutting back and focusing. Look at Matthew Marks. When he takes on a new artist, it's like, oh, Matthew Marks just took on a new artist. He doesn't do this very often. And look at his program. Look at the names on that list. They're substantial people. And he does not have, he's got he's got New York and a few galleries, and he's got LA. The space in New York, he's got a guy sitting in the room, right? I mean, I think he's got Jasper Johns up right now with a guy sitting in the room on a folding table. And then across the street, he's got some space. He's got the space in LA. I'm sorry, it's terrible space. It's not a great space at all.
But it's a great program.
And he's kept it tight. And he doesn't have massive expensive. And he doesn't do every art fair. And when he does do Basel, he's there for one day. He hardly ever switches out the booth. There's like 8 things in there. It's a little precious, okay. But there's phenomenal stuff in there.
Those are the people I was talking to Kamal Manor the other day in Korea of all places. And it seems to me he's incredibly well positioned because he's got a really strong roster of artists that are not like all decorative things, with ability to really manage their careers and make good decisions. And it's like, okay, it's opportunity time for them. Are they just going to go big, or are they going to like, what are they going to do? It's a different story than the people who are struggling. But those galleries, there's a group of them that are really.
Yeah, he's doing really well in Paris, and you don't see him moving to New York or London or Brussels or Seoul. It's smart.
I did return my call, dude, by the way. But aside from that, but now.
Well, there's another one too, like Sadie Coles. She's in London, and she's got various spaces in London, but she also never really went crazy, and she could have. But she
I'm
didn't.
sure people were throwing money at her.
Maybe, but I mean, Spruce Moggers kind of went nuts, right? It's like, it's
okay. So let's go down to like, you open your gallery, you know. I mean, most galleries don't survive 8 or 10 years. So it's a pretty common thing. And it's like, I've often said, most restaurants close, 90% of them close. We kind of make too big a deal out of this happening. It's happened forever, and it will happen forever. It's part of that. But what would you say to the sincere young solo guy with, you know, part-time help? What should they be doing now?
There's no avant-garde. You got to fuck it up. You got to make things interesting. You got to change it. You got to do what I said before, play the game, change the rules. That's what my gallery did. That's what Tim and I did. You got to mess things up. And it's boring as hell right now. So if you go follow, if you think that getting into this slipstream and you're just going to, you know, jump in the water with the, you know, the tanker, and you got your little dinghy, no way. Don't even go into that ocean. Like, do something different.
That's what I feel. You know, it's like I go to NADA, or Homie doesn't really do satellite fairs, but I go occasionally, and I understand, you know, so you see 100 galleries with 3 by 4 foot colorful paintings of maybe somebody in the bodega or some sort of little abstract thing. And it's like, I get it. You're trying to make your rent.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, this is the greatest opportunity you ever had, because, by the way, did you see the director of MoMA just walked right past your booth, spent 10 seconds? Did you see, you know, Stevie Cohen went through? Did you see, you know, Jeff Poe went through? You have the greatest opportunity for us to go, holy crap, what's that? I remember at the Gramercy Park Hotel, that's before your time, 1994, there was a guy named like Tolan Grinnell or something, and he did something crazy. And it's like, in one of these rooms, and it's like, oh my God, look at that. And it's like, there's an inability or an unwillingness to do that. And I would say to a young gallery, do that, because maybe you'll be bust in 3 years instead of 6 years, but maybe you'll be able to do something that matters.
Yep.
And if you do something that matters, people will respond.
Yep.
So instead of hitting your head against the wall for 6 years, hit your wall for 3 years and then move on.
Yeah. But do something you're right, and work with the artist too. I mean,
well, it's ultimately
it's
up
a
to
collaboration.
The artist. It's up to the artist to make better work.
It is, and there's the other elephant in the room is too many artists. I'm sorry, and too many galleries, and too much bad art, and too many bad galleries. It's become too much. But that's not going to change. That's just the way it goes. That's how it is.
Well, there's 3 million in America or more. There's more artists than lawyers. There's a joke in there someplace. But, and 2.9999 whatever should stop making art. But you can't say that to any of them, because you might say that to one of the ones who really, really is the one who's going to be Matthew Barney or Bruce Nauman and do that. So it's kind of not our job to tell them no, but it's not our job to say everything's going to be okay. You should all survive.
Yeah. But like Jamie and a Flant or whatever it was called, and she opened up the artist run situation too, is another one that is an interesting option. Artists can do things too. You don't need to rely on a dealer to guide you. Do it yourself. Get out there and
I think
at
the higher level, artists are managing their own careers much more, rather than being dependent on dad to be everything. And that's a smart thing.
Yeah, but I'm talking about
younger galleries.
Yeah, younger artists with, yes, not somebody that's I'm talking about just go out there and do something interesting, create a collective, do something for Christ's sake.
Do something that gets our attention in a good way.
When we return, hear the final part of our conversation with Jeff Poe, in which Jeff shares his optimism for a radically reformed art world, what's keeping people from splurging on art in the modern era, and what exactly he's been up to in retirement. BitGo is the first digital asset company to focus exclusively on serving institutional clients. Founded in 2013, BitGo is the largest independent digital asset custodian in the world, securing approximately 20% of all on-chain Bitcoin transactions by value. For more information, please visit www.bitgo.com.
Let's finish up in a different way. Like, where are we going to be in 5 years, 10 years? What do you see coming down the future?
Market's going to come back. It's not going away. It's not over. It's not dead by any stretch. It's just a different time. It's different than all those years you just counted out before. It is harder, and I think it's going to continue to be harder. And I do think that galleries can grow by contracting, actually, and if they take that memo and live with it, maybe. But in the next 5 years, 10 years, the market is going to radically change, because is Larry going to be here in 5 years or 10 years? I mean, that's a whole podcast in itself. Seriously. Like, what happens then? And nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah, we did ask Larry to do this, but he quite wisely declined.
No, of course he's not going to talk about it, because he doesn't have a plan, because I don't think he does, because his ego's too big. He's never going to die, right? So it's just ridiculous. But anyway, that is going to be an enormous moment in the art world, in the gallery world. And that is coming. And, something's going to have to change from that. And we're going to see what's going to wind up happening with the other galleries that are all shifting and changing. But the legacy galleries, they're going to continue to go on. They're not this thing I threw out there is not for the big five or whatever you want to call it. That's not, that juggernaut's going to continue to go down that line, and they don't care. But
see, I'm bullish on the market, and I think it's just going to become so horizontal that in 10 years, 90% of the people buying $20,000 objects will never heard of Luring Augustine and won't care. And that's a big increase to the total market. So I see, the winners of that are going to be the auction houses, and maybe the art fairs.
It could be. I mean, people do still, the other part of this that's a problem is people want experiences. Are you going to spend $200,000 on a painting? Or are you going to spend $200,000 and you're wealthy? Or are you going to spend $200,000 taking your kids private and going skiing?
I'm
so
going
you can have the
take
experience.
the plane to Venice and have fun. So
right.
So maybe you can both.
Yeah. Well, that's my point. Like, there is a change now. In the old days, it would have been like, let's just go get the painting and we'll just go to. But now it's let's have this phenomenal experience together.
Well, before you came here, I was like listening to a sale at Phillips this morning, the new Now, and it's like 42,000 bid from Lebanon. It's like, what? 45 China, 48 Lebanon. It's like, whoa, something there is like, we're in a very strange moment. It's like the world has gotten much bigger and flatter at the same time.
Yes, it's flattened out, entropy. Absolutely.
And so, Jeff, what the heck are you doing these days?
Not a lot, to be quite honest with you. I thought I was going to do something, and I'm actually not going to do it. I thought I was going to do this little project in my house in Malibu. I'm not going to do it. I just need to take time to kind of calm it all down. Although I have been giving casual advice to
artists or dealers.
Both. People call me, and I'm happy to give back. I don't want anything from anyone. I just want to help out at this point. I will never have a gallery again, and I will never open a business or do any of that ever again. I don't mind, though, being of assistance, because somebody's got to do it, right? It's okay to give back and be a little bit philanthropic for free.
What kind of questions are the artists and the galleries asking you when they're asking you for advice?
Basically, kind of the things I just answered. How do I grow?
And you say you grow by shrinking?
Yeah. And, I'm a young gallery. What do I do? Well, go out and go find a dirt lot and do a show in it. I'm an artist. What do I do? Be careful right now. Calm it down. Don't overproduce. keep your prices stable, that kind of thing. I mean, it's just
good Instagram material. Well done.
It's really,
you don't have to sound bites like that.
It's simple. It's not that hard. It's just don't drink the Kool-Aid, especially right now. It's the worst time to do anything like that. And I don't know where there is going to be another time to do that. That's why it's, good artists change things. Good dealers change things. And there's an opportunity out there. You just have to be creative and stop thinking the same way everybody else is thinking and stop trying to get in there with the tankers. It's not a game to play. No way. Humble ball.
So, Jeff, thank you. We're going to have to make this an annual affair, you think?
I don't know. Maybe.
First one who hits 80 has to stop or something.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. So the Bear Fact says, thank you very much, Jeff Poe.
Sure.
It's really valuable to have someone who's telling their truths without being too afraid of repercussions. And I think that's going to become more and more critical. And as you say, that's the first step in any change, is recognizing, meaning there's a problem. So doing it, and you're leading the way with that. So thank you for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to Jeff Poe for coming back on the show. And thank you to Arthur Analytics for sponsoring this episode of the Bear Facts podcast. Their app is available on the web or on your mobile device, featuring the data and insights that keep the art world, and we know we need to keep the art world moving, in one easy-to-use application. Arthur Analytics is changing the game for art collectors around the world. You can try it out for yourself, no commitment required, at arthuranalytics.com/bearfacts. Be there or be square.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Facts podcast. Our host is Josh Baer. Our executive producer is Luyang Zhang. Our content strategist is Boliang Shen. And I'm Patrick Hill, our associate editor. Our audio editor for this episode is Auntie Lane. Check back soon for future episodes as we unpack the inner workings of the global art industry through exclusive, candid interviews with key players in the business, as they offer their perspectives on art and the market in the US, Asia, Europe, and beyond.